Hey guys, it's Thea again. Today, back again for revision, and we're going to be starting off with Hitler's Germany. Ooh, Nazis. Um, okay, fair warning, I might be making some really controversial jokes and statements, which I have learned I do from my last attempts at this. Okay, so let's get started. So the first thing we're going to be talking about is the impact of World War I on Germany, how, the Treaty of Versailles settlement affected Germany and the German political scene and eventually would, shape Hitler's rise to power. So on November 11th, 1918, they signed the armistice. Germany signed the armistice, which ended World War I. And in 1919, in Paris, I believe, they drew up the Treaty of Versailles, which basically, decided on borders and reparation payments and so on and so forth. An interesting thing about this is the signing of the armistice was sort of used as a form of propaganda, and I'll explain what I mean. So at the time, the German public believed that they were winning the war, right? They didn't actually know, per se what was going on. So they believed that they were winning the war. And then they hear on November 11th that the Weimar Republic, whatever, or the government at the time, I'm not sure if it was the Weimar Republic, but the government at the time, they signed this armistice, which means that Germany can no longer attain that victory that the public thought that they had. They thought, hey, we were just about to win this. Why would you do that? They all, so taking advantage of that fact, Hitler actually goes and coins this term, which I could be butchering it, I don't remember it, Durchschlägern or something. In German, which means basically stab in the back. So Hitler coins this term and he says that, these November criminals, because it was signed in November, the government are November criminals who have stabbed us, the people, the soldiers, in the back. Right? So he sort of questions, what was the point of fighting if at the end of the day you were just going to sign an armistice, right? Why did we try to win? Which, obviously garners public sentiment and so on and so forth. Now, when it comes to, sorry, I know I'm saying that a lot. When it comes to the Treaty of Versailles, at the time, the French Prime Minister, I believe Clemenceau, I don't know how to say it, he basically wanted Germany to pay for most of the reparations, and Britain wanted to protect their naval fleet. So that was sort of the setup of the Treaty of Versailles. Historian Steiner, 2011, describes the Treaty of Versailles as a bundle of compromises that fully satisfied neither of the three being Germany, Britain, and France. Okay, now if we talk about German losses with the Treaty of Versailles at the end of World War I, they lost 100% of their pre-war colonies, 80% of their military 80% of their fleet and 12% of their population. So big losses. The historian Hildebrand says that Nazism was dominated by Hitler's personal ideology, so it could never fit into the European idea of fascism. Which a lot of people argue the point that, Nazism is like a form of fascism, so that's just an opinion on it. Another important thing to note, pre-war, would be Mein Kampf, the book that Hitler wrote, which my mother really likes reading, weirdly enough. Mein Kampf actually signifies or denotes that Hitler had a really clear foreign policy aim before coming into power. So you can look at how that shapes his foreign policy in the later years. These are kind of important. We can go over them. So under the Treaty of Versailles, there's a few articles of importance. Sorry, my contacts are bugging. Okay, a few articles of importance. Article 42, which talks about the demilitarization of the Rhineland. Article 45, which talks about the Saar coalfields belonging to France for 15 years. Article 80, which says that Germany cannot reunite with Austria. And Article 87, which assigns the Polish corridor to Poland. So what were Hitler's aims going into, the government with his foreign policy? Gross Deutschland, which basically was pan-Germanism. So he wanted to reunite all the colonies or states that Germany lost, like Poland and Czechoslovakia and Austria. Then another aim was living space, or Lebensraum, which basically just said, that they needed space for settlements, and also argued to the effect of, like Hitler's racialism and social Darwinism. Then another important point would be allies and enemies. So Hitler saw Russia as an enemy because he was afraid, he hated communists. He saw France as an enemy because of obviously the Treaty of Versailles, dispute. So he saw France as an opponent, but he, oddly enough, thought that the British had the possibility of becoming their allies, because they had opposed France in the war in 1923. Okay, now let's talk about the Weimar Republic, and some of its shortcomings. So, so in 1923, as I was talking about, France and Belgium invade the Ruhr, right? And they stay there and they say, you know what, pay us back. They demand reparations. They try to force Germany into it. So the German government, the Weimar Republic, encourages the public to engage in passive resistance, not giving them what they want and starving their troops and stuff like that, which was difficult because now their sales were down and the government still somehow had to pay everyone. They still had to keep wages going, so they started printing more, but that led to hyperinflation. So by then, one pre-war mark was equal to 2,500 marks. So a lot of people's savings and pensions were scrapped completely, and that ended up alienating the public from the government. An interesting person to focus on is Gustav Stresemann. So Stresemann, he was Chancellor and Foreign Minister from 1924 to 29, and he helped stabilize the economy by introducing the Renten mark, and also by getting the Dawes and Young plans signed with the U.S. So what were they? So the Dawes Plan in 1924 basically delayed German reparations for 2 years. It scaled them down, and it also got loans from the U.S. And the Young's Plan in 1929 just added further loans to this. So an economically stable Germany meant that they could now engage in global politics, which they'd sort of been isolated from because they were so busy with their reparations and with, post-war conditions. Right. So some interesting things that happened, while Stresemann was implementing these policies was that in 1925, Germany entered the Locarno Pact. In 1926, they entered the League of Nations. In 1922, they signed the Rapallo Treaty. In 1928, they signed the Kellogg-Briand Pact. Obviously, we know the Kellogg-Briand Pact. So, interestingly enough, we were talking about the Dawes and Young's plans before. So Weimar, the Republic was super dependent on the U.S., which meant that their economic markets were linked. So then comes along the 1929 Wall Street crash and the Great Depression, and Germany tanks again. Interdependence, you can't help that. So, seeing this, atmosphere that's ripe ripe, so whatever, seeing this atmosphere that's ripe for like political, whatever, like a reinvention, Hitler seizes his chance with the 1932 elections, where Hitler runs against Hindenburg. Yep. Wasn't that the name of that blimp? I'm gonna look that up. Just give me 2 seconds. I know this isn't important, and I'm probably gonna Hindenburg blimp. I was right. Okay. Anyways, so he goes up. Sorry, he goes up against Hindenburg, and the Nazi Party ends up winning 30% of votes in the first round and 32% in the second round. And by 1933, Hitler is chancellor. Okay. So in 1933, some other events. The Reichstag is burnt down, censorship comes into play. You have the Enabling Act, you have the Night of Long Knives, where 200 SA members are purged by the brown shirts. Yeah, we heard that one before, huh? Real original. And you also had the setting up of the Dachau concentration camp for Hitler's political enemies. So Hitler, like his predecessors, wanted a hegemony over Europe, which basically meant he just wanted to monopolize it. He wanted to rule over it. That was said by historian Fischer, and then historian Lee in 1987 argues that Hitler saw revisionism as a step towards projects, not as an actual foreign policy aim. So, he differentiates. He says, no, actually, he wasn't like his predecessors. So there's that. Okay, let's talk about Europe after 1933. So after 1933, let's go country-wise. So let's go with Britain first. So Britain at the time is dealing with their own economic crisis. They are trying to monitor Japan's, constant attempts to expand into Asia, and the resources are super stretched. And they're also still afraid of communists, so they see Germany and Hitler as a sort of buffer for Stalin's Russia. Then if we look at France, France sees a possible German threat after their, advent in the war, and they also don't have people to back them up, like they don't have the US or Britain enforcing the Treaty of Versailles, so they can't do anything. And they build the line of defense, or the Maginot Line, in 1929. And they also form alliances with Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, which is sort of like a diplomatic encirclement, which we'll come back to later. Now, as for the USA, they are busy with domestic concerns. They're still in economic recovery. They have national insularity, which basically means that they're still pretty much isolationist, and they're not in the market for collective security as of now. Then, interestingly enough, we can also talk about Britain and France and how they were militarily weak after the war, and they also couldn't come to terms on how exactly to deal with Hitler. And you could talk about the League of Nations failures with Manchuria and Japan, and how that brings down the value of the Washington system. So in 1932, at the Lausanne Conference, Germany's reparations payments have been cancelled. Hitler moved with ultimate speed and purpose again, says historian Steiner, 2011. Basically, Hitler moves with speed and purpose in order to withdraw Germany from many multinational agreements, to isolate France, and to challenge the Treaty of Versailles, and to engage in negotiations with Britain. Then if we look at the 1933 League of Nations Disarmament Conference, it fails because they know they want to disarm, but they don't know how to do it, and Hitler sort of walks out because he's like, well, you guys clearly don't have your shit together. So now let's move on to the 1934 Non-Aggression Pact between Germany and Poland. Interestingly enough, at that time, Germany was on the rise, and, Britain and France feared them, so Poland was like, hey, maybe I should be scared of you too. And so they're sort of like freaking out, and they're like, what are we going to do? So they end up getting into a 10-year treaty with Germany, because they're like, this can protect us. Anyways, so they sign the treaty, and by doing so, that ends Czech-Polish ties, and what it does is it breaks out of France's diplomatic encirclement. So up to this point, it was sort of like all these little countries piled up against Germany, and then Germany it made a breakthrough, and I guess it showed France that we are a power. We are a power. We're gonna get more powerful. People are scared of us. So what you're doing here by circling us doesn't really do much, Like we're still gonna, like we have the mind, we have strength. You have the brains, but we have strength, and that's gonna win every time, basically. Okay, again, that could be like a David Goliath situation. Like, is it gonna win? Who knows? They don't, but okay. Now let's talk about Hitler's foreign policy aims by this time, by 1933, by the time he's really in power. So let's use an acronym. We're going to use R.U.T. So R-U-T. So R here stands for rearm. Hitler wants to rearm because the Treaty of Versailles obviously, disarms them. They lose 80% of their fleet. That's a lot gone. Next, he wants to unite all of Germany. Again, pan-Germanism, they lose 12% of their population. He wants it back. And then T, territory. We're looking at Lebensraum and living space again, and how he wants more living space. So let's start with rearmament. So 1934, Hitler pulls out of League of Nations. 1935, you have military rallies, conscription, and by 1939, the army has increased in number by 10 times. It's the number before. Interesting point in remilitarization would be the Rhinelands, because remember Article 45, if I'm not wrong? No, 42? I was right the first time. I thought it in my head. Okay, Article 42 dealt with demilitarizing the Rhineland. So Hitler was like, you know what, let's put the guns back in there. Anyway. So he decides to remilitarize, and how's he going to do that? Well, in 1935, you have the Stresa Pact members, Italy, France, and Britain, who decide to ally against the Nazis, against Germany. And interestingly enough, a little while later in 1935, Britain signs the Anglo-German naval agreement with Germany, which is weird, because wasn't that you a few months ago that was like, oh, we hate the Nazis? Yeah. Okay, so, okay. So Britain does this, I'm guessing partially because it's sort of like, oh, look, we're on good terms with Germany. That's not going to do you much. So they sign this, and they help bring Germany's fleet to 35% of that of Britain's. Okay, and then by 1936, Hitler marches into the Rhineland with 30,000 troops. Interestingly enough, Hitler had given his troops the order that should there be any trouble or confrontation, just leave. So they went in thinking they were going to leave, but nobody stopped them. They just marched right in. Why is that? So at the time, Britain was preoccupied. Well, no, Britain was smug because they had just signed this naval agreement. They were like, you know what, they're not going to do anything. Let them have it, right? Is that smart? France at the time had a lot of internal issues and this political scandal that they were dealing with. Italy was invading Abyssinia, remember, because this is 1936. And Russia was dealing with purges under Stalin. So that was the Rhinelands. So basically Hitler just gets the Rhinelands because he's like, you know what? And he marches in and he takes it. So Hitler had gambled successfully again, said Fischer. So, okay. Now let's talk about uniting Germany. So one of the colonies, or whatever, former components of Germany that Hitler wanted to reamass was Austria. So in 1934, Hitler sends troops to, go into Austria, but when Italy sends troops in, Hitler pulls back, so that was a failed attempt to invade in 1934. 1935, the Stresa Pact is signed. However, you could argue it fails with, the whole Anglo-German naval agreement and Italy and Abyssinia, because then the Stresa members are, like, condemning Italy, so it's like, why would you sign that with them and then condemn them? Anyways. And then in 1936, you have the Rome-Berlin Axis, which Rome, Berlin, Italy, and Germany. They have a pact, which later extends into the, I forget what it's called, something with Japan, and it's like the Pact of Steel. Sorry, you have the Rome, Berlin. Actually, wasn't the Pact of Steel? Never mind. We'll circle back to that. Forget I said that. Just Rome, Berlin Axis, 1936. So in Austria, Schuschnigg refuses to back down, and he calls for a plebiscite, which gets a 99% yes for German, reamassment, whatever. Although, of course, Hitler's troops had a role to play in that. They sort of coerced it. Okay, now let's move on to Sudetenland, which is Czechoslovakia. I don't know why you'd call it that, but apparently you do. So Czechoslovakia, you had 3 million people of Germanic origin living in Czechoslovakia. However, the people there knew that if they were reamassed, they would lose their border security and industrial resources. However, is it really a choice? No, you're just gonna get got, bro. Okay, so 1938, you have the Berchtesgaden Conference, where Chamberlain and Hitler vote on, what should be done in Czechoslovakia. Then in 1938, you have the Bad Godesberg Conference, which it's in the name, it went bad. And then basically Hitler was just really mad. Okay, and then in 1938, you have the Munich Conference, which interestingly enough excludes Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union, who you would imagine are pretty mad. And the Stresa members basically give over the Czech Republic to Hitler, declaring peace in our time, as Chamberlain puts it. And that's a policy of appeasement. Just think about it, okay, from my perspective. Say this glue stick is Czechoslovakia. Oh, okay, say I'm Czechoslovakia, and this is my glue stick, right? The glue stick stands for, let's say my country, my land, and I'm like, this is my land, right? And someone's like, and you're like, no, this is mine, okay? Let's stay away from it. And you just put it down for a second, and you just step out of the room, and then a bunch of, hooligans step in, and they're like, we should give this to that guy, because he's big and scary, and he might eat us otherwise. And you're just waiting outside that room, because you don't really know what's going on. And they're like, here, take it. I'm sure you wouldn't mind. Yes, I do mind. This is mine. So I hope that analogy helps you understand it. Dually, let's talk about territory. So Sudetenland, also interestingly, was a matter of territory because it's Lebensraum, it's living space, baby. I don't know why I did that. I can't take that back, I'm sorry. So you have territory now. In 1939, Hitler breaks the Munich Agreement and he invades Czechoslovakia. And this is pure invasion. No excuses. He says it himself. It's just an invasion. And Italy allies with Germany because the Stresa members had excluded them previously. The USSR is mad. Italy allies with them because of the whole Abyssinia thing. The USSR is mad because they've been excluded. And Britain and France pledged to basically step in if something happens again. Now let's look at Poland. Super interesting. This is basically the brink of World War II. So 1938, Hitler demands the city of Danzig, which actually ties into one of the articles that I haven't mentioned. I believe it was number 100. And then you have the Anti-Comintern Pact. You have the Pact of Steel. And in 1939, you have the Nazi-Soviet Pact, which was actually a secret protocol that assigned spheres of influence to them and also divvied up Poland between them. And this happened after the Anglo-Soviet talks failed. So the Soviet Union is sort of like, hey, you can't, keep making me wait to the British. And they're like, you know what? Let me do a little role play so we can remember this. Well, sir, we would like peace in our time, but we need some time to debate whether we are willing to take you communists. Okay, we wait for you to finish talk. Yes. How long you take? Give us a month. A month? We do not have that kind of time, comrade. I'll take my, excuse me. Yes, hello, is this the Queen? I cannot take this much time. You, fellow, I like you, comrade. What say we make deal? Ditch them. You take half of Poland, I take half of Poland. Yeah. Okay, so you got the general idea, right? Okay, interesting. Let's look at this acronym, THUG. Why did the Soviet Union sign it? THUG. T. Time to prepare for war. It gives them time to prepare for war. H. Hope to gain more territory and things, because so far everyone's like, hey, you better stop. But then Hitler's sort of like, hey, I'll give you shit. Like, you just need to say you're my friend, right? So, which is a good deal. U, unhappy with the British. Gee, I wonder why. And G, German domination, because they're like, you know what, they're powerful. Sure. Let's look at some of the things that Fisher said, and let's talk about how great of an old white man he is. I actually don't know if that's true, but I'm guessing he's old and white. So, ruthless power politics were the only effective policy against war-weary and vacillating opponents. Which is what he said, that Germany had no option, basically, but to pursue a ruthless policy against these cowardly and confused British. Hitler's belief in international blackmail and intimidation, I believe that makes sense by itself, promoted friendship of two fascist tyrants and further polarized the EU. It also gave Hitler direct access to southeastern Europe from Vienna. Vienna was a buffer zone for Russia at the time. Well, that's been German Nazism. I will leave you with a really cute little picture that I drew up. Very controversial, as it has been this whole experience. That is Indiana Jones and the Nazis. I hope you like it. And next week on PBS, we're going to be talking about Mussolini's Italy. Okay. Yeah, see you around, guys.